On November 13th, 2004, some commercial fishermen were out on their boat in False Bay off Western Cape Province, South Africa. They had just pulled in their nets, and their nets were full of a fish called steenbras. Now, steenbras are protected fish, so they had to release them all. The other thing that commercial fishermen in the area will tell you about these fish, though, is they're incredibly powerful and hard fighting fish, especially when there's a school of them in a net trying to get out. They fight so hard, in fact, that when they're still well under the surface of the water in these nets, the surface of the ocean will appear to be boiling. And this level of activity will oftentimes attract predators to these fishing boats. And that's exactly what happened on this occasion. As the men began to release these fish back into the ocean, they say that the biggest shark they had ever seen surfaced right next to their boat. They said it was between 5.5 and 6 meters long. That's 18 to 20 feet, roughly. Now, the shark did not bother them, and it did not bother their fish net either. It just kind of swam around for a few minutes checking out the activity. This is not really surprising because when great white sharks reach this size, they don't really eat fish anymore too much. Mainly they prey on marine mammals. That's what almost exclusively makes up their diet. So the shark just, it must have sensed all this activity around. It just came to check it out, decided it wasn't interested in attacking these fishing nets. So it took off, and it headed off in the direction of shore. More specifically, it was headed directly towards a popular swimming beach called Fish Hook Beach. And the men can see this, they recognize this. So they finish releasing their fish and they head straight towards Fish Hook Beach. They get there and they begin waving this red flag that they have on board their boat that's supposed to alert people to the presence of sharks. And they're yelling at the swimmers in the water, hey, there's a shark around here, get out of the water. And everyone does, with no incident. So then the fishermen leave and they pull into the port and they go immediately to authorities and they alert authorities that they have seen this gigantic great white shark in the bay, right next to this beach. So authorities go out and they encourage people not to swim for the rest of the day, and they keep an eye out for this shark, but they don't see anything. And same thing the next day. They would go out and they would encourage people not to swim. Hey, we have reports of this very, very large shark in the area. So the next day, the beach was effectively closed on the 14th. But on the 14th, the whole day, no authorities spot anything. They've got lookouts up on this mountainside, this ridge that overlooks the water. They don't see anything. So the following day, on the 15th, the beach is effectively back open, back in full operation. At 7 o'clock in the morning, 77-year-old Tyna Webb was going for her morning swim. She had swam 6 days a week, every week, for the last 17 years in this same exact spot. She had swam out about 60 yards offshore and begun just doing laps, adjacent to the beach, back and forth. At the same time, a man by the name of Tim Adkins was in his vehicle up on this mountainside or this ridge top, kind of overlooking the beach. He's just enjoying the scenery, enjoying this beautiful morning. It's very calm out. It's sunny. It's a beautiful morning. So he's just kind of looking out all over everything. And he's only a few hundred yards away, so he can clearly see, the swimmers in the water and everything else. And at this point, there's only 2 swimmers in the water, Tyna and one other person. There are several other people on the beach, but they have not gotten in the water yet, or they don't plan to go in the water at all. They're just enjoying the beach. There's also some folks that have houses, within 100 to 150 yards of this area, and 2 of them specifically are out on their front porch, kind of doing the same thing that Mr. Watkins is doing, just enjoying the morning. Mr. Watkins, who's in his vehicle, just looking out across the water, sees Tyna swimming along when off to the side, he sees this huge black shape surface to the top of the water. And it's quite a ways away from Tyna still, but it's heading directly towards her. And it is massive. I mean, he says it's shaped like a torpedo, and it's just absolutely huge, like the size of a pickup truck. And it is just barreling towards Tyna as she's swimming. And he immediately realizes what this is. But of course, there's nothing he can do about it. I mean, he's hundreds of yards away. he can't yell, he can't scream, nobody's going to hear him. He's got no way to signal anybody down there what he's seeing. So he watches as Tyna is swimming along. This 5.5 to 6 meter great white shark comes speeding. He says it doesn't even slow down at all. He says it approached from like 100 yards off at great speed. It never slowed down, and it rams Tyna in the side and gives her just one massive bite and then releases her. And he says immediately the water just completely turns red all around Tyna. The shark would bite her, release her. It would spin around, and then it would come back, and the top of its body, the front half of it, would completely breach out of the water, and then it would latch onto her again around her midsection, and it would violently begin shaking Tyna on the top of the water. Now, at this point, she's probably already deceased. She didn't even really have time to let out much of a scream or anything after the first attack. It was so fast, and it's such a big animal. It hit her so hard and so viciously. The first attack probably killed her. But now it's got her on the surface of the water, and all of these people on the beach, and this other swimmer, and these people hanging out on their porch, they're all watching as this shark is just violently shaking her body across the surface. It releases her again, and then it swims around her in circles 3 times before it comes back, and then it grabs her body one final time and brings her under the water. Now, at this point, the people on the beach, all they can see is the shark's fin and this big pool of red in the water. But Mr. Watkins, who's he's at a high elevation, he can still clearly see everything because he's looking down on the water. So he can now see this massive shark has just got Tyna in its jaws, and now it's beginning to feed on her as it swims her out into deeper water before it finally just descends deep enough to where he can't see either one of them anymore. So he actually calls authorities. I mean, right away, as soon as this happens, he calls authorities. They come out with a couple of search boats, and they bring out a helicopter. And the helicopter would actually locate this shark. The pilot and the observer in the helicopter would say the shark was bigger than the helicopter, which makes sense if it's 20 feet long. But at this point, they don't see Tyna anymore. Nothing of Tyna was ever recovered except for her red swim cap. And based on what Tim Watkins would say and what everybody else saw, it is pretty widely accepted that this shark consumed Tyna whole.